Hello and welcome to Motorsport Radio. It is a brand new year, which means, of course, brand new seasons of motor racing. I hope you had a good new year. I hope you had a good Christmas, you all, and I hope you had a safe Christmas. You are, of course, joining us live on Motorsport Radio. Contact us through all big social media sites. We love to have a discussion. We love to have an argument. We love to have a debate. And joining us with this debate in the IMSA WeatherTech Championship is, of course, Andy Hopley and Andy Lloyd. Now, we're going to start off with a simple question, Andy Lloyd. What is the IMSA WeatherTech Racing Championship?
The IMSA WeatherTech Sportscar Championship. First of all, good evening, gentlemen. Great to be back. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've been on the show, but start of a new year, so off we go again. Very much looking forward to it. What is the IMSA WeatherTech Sportscar Championship? It's one of the biggest sports car racing championships in the world, sitting alongside the FIA World Endurance Championship and the European Le Mans Series as probably the biggest multi-country sport globally. It's organised by IMSA, who I have to say have probably got a different approach to how they manage and have developed and promote the series. Probably more commercially focused, could I say, than some of the other leading sports car championships. A very fine balance between what the manufacturers need, what the drivers need, what the amateur drivers need, how you balance performance or get competitive racing across the various rounds. 12 weekends across 2022 with some of the biggest sports car races in the world. Interestingly, it probably starts, the season probably starts with a jewel in the crown for the championship, which is the Rolex 24 at the Daytona, which has one of the biggest grids of the season. It finishes with Petit Le Mans in October, but over the course of the year it will visit some iconic circuits such as Sebring, Long Beach, Detroit, Watkins Glen, Motorsport in Canada, Lime Rock, Road America, VIR. Probably the most interesting thing is the class structure, and I know we're going to come on to that later on. We've discussed before, haven't we, the fact that we're in a transition period for top-level sports car racing. This is the final year that the Daytona, or the DPI class, Daytona Prototype International, will compete before they move on to LMDH in 2023. In terms of the prototypes, we also have the, globally recognised LMP2 class, which has been very successful, big competitive grids around the world for that. LMP3, which has joined the grid to kind of, I wouldn't say make up the numbers, but to make more competitive racing. LMP3 racing is always excellent. And of course the GT class, I know we're going to discuss this later on, but very much the start of a new era for GT racing in America, with the way that the GTD class has been structured for 2022.
Yeah, I mean, you said I've watched it a few years, and I would say, personally, it's been better to watch than the WEC, and probably on level with ELMS. But as you've just gone through with the calendar, we'll discuss a bit of that now. Andy Hopley, first of all, Happy New Year to you. So the Rolex 24 obviously kicks off in a couple of weeks. So Andy, what about that makes you really interested in watching it?
Not only because of the bigger grid sizes, it's also to do with it having obviously the oval course and then going on to the road course. So it's kind of a nice spectacle to kickstart Daytona's official racing season, due to the fact is they've got obviously the Daytona 500 in NASCAR, but that is a couple of months later, and that seems to be kicking South Florida or whereabouts in America it is. It seems to be very interesting to see exactly what the grids are going to be like for that, especially it's a big, massive spectacle.
Yeah, as it is. I mean, it's huge as well, and we're not even considering the fact that they've got the Raw before the 24, which is pretty much all of the practice sessions. They have a whole week. People are already starting to turn up to camp there, and it's not. We've still got 10 days before that even starts, but it's that big a spectacle. We get people who genuinely will camp there for a whole month watching the practice sessions, not just to the Daytona 24 hours, but we get a lot of NASCAR practice happening before the Raw, before the 24 and all this. So it is a huge spectacle. On the 24 hours, you're probably getting nearly 300,000 people going to watch it. It's that bigger event. I don't think there's any event around the world that attracts that many fans for a 24-hour race. For me, one of the standout rounds in this calendar, and it's been on the calendar for a number of years now, is the Long Beach Grand Prix. I describe it as the Monaco of endurance racing because it is just that. It doesn't have all the classes, it only has DPI and the GTD. But if you've never seen Long Beach, look it up. It is unique under any circumstances, for not just for the last corner, which is almost taken at a standstill. It is so tight, but it is the fact that you do get speeds of up to 160, 170 on the DPI class around the streets of Long Beach. And then you get to the fact that because there's about a 15-20 second margin between the DPI and the GTDs, the traffic very quickly becomes an issue. And we've seen many times where people have just been held up and dropped 4 positions in their class because of traffic. And this is, of course, a street circuit where there is no margin for error either. They get really close to barriers, so you tie it all in. A 2-hour race around Long Beach is one of the greatest races, I think, on the calendar. I mean, Andy Lloyd, of that calendar, which one to you stands out for you?
Well, I think they're all iconic tracks. Sebring, of course, which comes in March, the second round after the Rolex 24. We can overuse the term iconic, but really, I mean, that is probably one of the greatest sports car circuits in the world. Carved out of an old airfield. The concrete is not good. It's very bumpy. It can be very hot. And is always a great race. And, I get as much fun out of watching Sebring in 2022 as I do watching Sebring from sort of like the early 1970s, when the racing there was just as fast and furious. The other round that always interests me is Detroit, because typically that used to fall on the test weekend for the Le Mans 24 hours. So a lot of drivers, I mean, apart from the fact that Bel Air Raceway is a very tight circuit, and the racing was always frantic. Many of the drivers who were also racing in the 24 had to literally jump out their cars, jump in a private jet, get across the Atlantic as quickly as possible so they could actually get to Le Mans for the remainder of the test sessions on the Sunday afternoon. But all of the tracks for the IMSA WeatherTech Sportscar Championship are superb, and they all offer different challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And don't forget, of course, this year, let's say they're doing something a bit different with IMSA, aren't they? Because they've combined forces with WEC. So that weekend, you've got the 12-hour race on the Friday, and then the 1,000-mile WEC race on, I believe, the Saturday. So for fans going to watch it, it's going to be an event like no other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when this idea was first mooted a few years ago, everybody said, it's how are the logistics going to work with that many teams and that many transporters and that many cars trying to get into and out of the circuit? But it's worked, and it will work again. And I have to say, it's on my bucket list to go to the Rolex and to follow it up with the WEC, because that would be, an absolutely incredible weekend.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, Andy, are there any other circuits on that calendar that you think, oh, that could be one worth watch, Andy Hopley?
Yeah, I believe the Petite Le Mans at Road Atlanta is going to be obviously another exciting end to the season, because we do have the big 24-hour Daytona, but then it jumps into a Petite Le Mans 24-hour style race at Road Atlanta, and it seems to be where, you know, a lot of action's taken place in the last couple of years. I've not watched it fully, but I've seen bits and bats on YouTube, and it seems to be a very interesting pinnacle end to the season.
Yeah, and it's also, like I said, because it is the end of the season, this is where the championships all come in, because the other good, interesting thing about IMSA, not every class races at every circuit. So, for example, Long Beach, you only have the DPI and the GTD classes. At other circuits, you have the LMP2 and GTD or whatever. So at Road Atlanta, they all come back together for a big finale. And as you said, Road Atlanta is a great circuit. It encourages overtaking. It's very fast. And, you know, that sort of time of the year, October, weather could be a bit something coming into the changeable weather that you get in October. It's another great round. I mean, for me, finally, the big one for me is one that I think a lot of people don't realise or don't bother watching, and I think they should. It is Lime Rock Park, which is it's a GT only round, for the simple fact that the GT cars take about a minute to do a lap. So I believe it's a 2-hour race, but you're getting nearly 200 laps of racing, and it is so tight, it is so narrow, and yet it is so fast. The margin for error is almost nothing. You do have a big grass runoff areas that are often very dusty, which means the track gets very dusty, slippery. And it's, you know, I mean, if you've ever played it on sim racing or on the Xbox or whatever, Lime Rock is one of those circuits that you just cannot get right. Time, lap after lap after lap. And this is what the GT drivers struggle with, and this is why it's something to watch. Not only to that, it's a GT only race, and we know GTD is another very competitive class. So you have all of those factors going into one very small track. It becomes something of a spectacle. Now, the list of drivers for IMSA is huge. I mean, there's so many drivers to go through. So what I've come up with is the British drivers. So the ones for you guys at home, if you want to watch the championship, surely you want to support the British drivers who've gone overseas to take part, who've gone over there. So we'll start with, of course, the LMP2 driver, Matt Bell, who drove for the LMP3 outfit, United Autosport, and has also drove in the past for Bentley back in 2016. Now, Andy Lloyd, Matt Bell, he's just come out of retirement, I believe, isn't he, to do this?
Yeah, I mean, Matt Bell's one of those names that has been at the top level of sports car racing for many, many years. I was just looking at his CV, and he's he's been at the top level for a long, long time. I was just looking at his 2020. He actually won the IMSA Prototype Challenge, which is the LMP3 class. And last year finished second in European Le Mans Series LMP3 as well. So he's very experienced. He's going to be on the pace from the get-go. This is one of the interesting things with the way that the Rolex is structured, in as much as you've got the Raw before the 24, which is extensive practice and qualifying ahead of the race weekend. So you can get a very good sort of understanding of pace well ahead of the race, and he would definitely be one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested about that, we will be doing a Daytona 24-hour preview show in the middle of the Raw before the 24. So we'll be doing it on the Tuesday before the Sunday race. So it'll be something to tune into then. Andy Hopley, obviously, you've got, Wayne Boyd, who is an LMP2 driver, but you've also got a Ferrari driver who a lot of people probably do know, don't they?
Yeah, that's correct, Josh. James Collado. Obviously, he's been around for quite some time, racing Ferraris in either WEC or obviously notoriously on the Toka support package in single seaters, and it seems to be that he's adapted very well in the Ferrari, obviously with the Fiat Competizione Ferrari. He's obviously won the class for that last season, and it seems to be he's going to be right on the money yet again in the Ferrari.
Yeah, and just to bring in a little bit of news that broke, I think, about a couple of months ago now. This will be the last year, won't it, Andy Lloyd, for the Ferrari 488, and I believe new cars being made by Penske. Is that right?
Yes, I had to say I haven't really been following that story as closely, but the 488 now has been around for a number of years, so it probably is time for an upgrade on that. That's for sure.
Yeah, so we're hoping maybe James Collado could bow out with somewhat of a victory. But Andy Lloyd, Mike Conway, would you say that he's probably one of the biggest British names in the class, in the racing series?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, Mike Conway's been at the highest level of sports car racing for many, many years, latterly with Toyota. Won the WEC in the hypercar class. I mean, not that there was a vast amount of competition except between the two Toyotas in 2021. The guy is just a legend, and he's got, although he's in his sort of late 30s now, he's got many, many years still remaining if he wants to, at the very highest level. And I think he would definitely be one to watch throughout this Rolex.
Yeah, and he is also racing with a very competitive team, the Cadillac Racing DPI, which for vast amounts of last season was definitely up there battling for the lead. So there's not, I don't know, we don't really know whether he'll be doing WEC and IMSA, but if he is, he could probably even win both, which would be quite an achievement. Andy Hopley, another big name coming out of here is Oliver Gavin, who drives this year for Lexus Racing.
Yeah, that's correct, Josh. And Ollie Gavin, he's notorious for being part of Corvette for a good number of years. He's obviously a stalwart with Corvette, but now going to Lexus. And it's going to be very interesting to see how well, obviously, he was in the third in class with, obviously, Corvette, but now at Lexus, it's a different kettle of fish to the Corvette. But yeah, he's been around for quite some time, and especially racing stateside as well, because he's always been with Corvette, and now he's with Lexus. It's now going to be, as I say, a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, something to clarify is, if you've been watching WEC but you haven't been watching IMSA, you might be surprised to hear that we've got Lexus as part of the GT, but they have quite a wide variety of GT cars racing. I mean, you've got Porsches, Ferraris, Mercedes, I think Lamborghinis racing, and of course Lexus. So there is a big variety to watch, and Lexus are actually pretty competitive. Using the RCF GT3, they've been doing all right in the couple of seasons they've been racing with it. But Andy Lloyd, the heart of racing Aston Martin GTD team, they've got some quite big drivers in there, aren't they, at the moment, especially British drivers?
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned Ross Gunn, but sort of he has now been around for a number of years, very competitive, knows the Aston Martin inside out. Who else have they got in that team this year in the Aston Martin?
They've got Ian James.
Ian James is a very quick peddler. Ian James, although he is British, if my memory serves, I think he's been living in the States now for a number of years, was very closely aligned with Panos, was very competitive in the Panos Esperanti. I think that was 2 or 3 years ago. Basically untouchable. And I think, what was he racing? That's one of the, I think that was one of the SRO formula. Could have been Pirelli World Challenge, actually. But yeah, you know, a hardened competitor. And I'm sure that team is going to do very well.
And then the final driver, actually, in that is none other than Daryn Turner himself, who's going abroad. And obviously, we know Daryn Turner from British Touring Cars, 2008, Plato's teammate. But for a number of years, he's dominated Aston Martin, isn't he?
Well, he's probably now the senior Aston Martin factory driver. He's competed in Aston Martins in pretty much every single championship around the world. So there's not much about the Aston Martin Vantage GT3 car that he doesn't know. And that car will definitely be on the pace. Yeah,
it will do. I mean, Andy Hopley, we've got some others as well, of course. And one of them I found is quite an interesting one. It's Catherine Leggo, who's driving in the Porsche. So we've got even the British female racing.
Yeah, that's correct, Josh. And Catherine is a very established racer herself. She's obviously been racing stateside a couple of times. She's obviously been in, I think she was in IndyCar, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, ladies and gents. You know, I might be not 100% with that, but to have a female over in the Porsche and GTD, it's going to give hopefully more kickstart to get more females across to IMSA and hopefully see more that side of racing that, you know, that we've been wanting to see, whether it's in touring cars, GT, you name it. But to have a female on the grid is absolutely phenomenal against a lot of guys who are quite, in their own right, fastest peddlers. But, you know, it's going to be very interesting to see how well she gets on.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, to give the ultimate respect to Catherine Legg, I mean, she's been at the top level of sports car, well, of motorsport for many, many years. It's you know, it's great to see her in the championship, but, you know, don't let anybody think that this is, you know, a sort of a breakthrough season for Catherine. She's been at the top for a long, long time. I remember her racing the Delta Wing some years back. Not a particularly successful car, but a very interesting program. And I was just looking at her schedule recently. I mean, she raced in IMSA and in the WEC in 21, as well as some GT World Challenge rounds as well. So yeah, very experienced driver.
Yeah, and I was quite impressed when I saw this. And I did look back at some of his racing, and I think he's been an incredible driver. He's Oliver Jarvis, who's once again racing with Mazda, and he actually finished third overall last season with Mazda. And I think him alongside Conway, I think Andy Lloyd could potentially be the favourite British drivers.
Yeah, I mean, Ollie Jarvis, an immensely likeable guy, very, very fast, was part of the Multimatic Mazda team in 21. Yeah, without a doubt, he's got a great pedigree, and I expect that team to do extremely well.
Yeah, and then of course we've got Nick Tandy, Andy Hopley, who has also been racing with Corvette, but he's a really big name in GT, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. He's obviously been a big name for quite some time. Obviously with the likes of obviously Porsche as well, but now he's in Corvette. You know, he finished second in class last season, so it's going to be very interesting to see how the Corvette, I think it is the new shape Corvette, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's the C8, yeah, it's the new one.
Yeah, so it's going to be very interesting to see how that new one gets on. And it might have had a season already under its belt, but, you know, to see how well it does, you know, I'm yet to see that car officially in race trim. Obviously, I'm not going to go over there and see it myself, but to see it either on YouTube or a stream somehow is going to be very amazing to see.
Yeah, and I mean, the Corvette is also doing its second full season in WEC as well, so it did disappoint a little bit, I think, last season. But then again, did we really expect the Corvette to compete strongly against the stalwart of the Porsches and the Ferraris? Probably not. In America, the Corvette tends to do a bit better because obviously it's its home ground. It's where it's been developed. So the Corvette is a great GT car, and it looks good as well. You've got to admit, a GT car has got to look good, and the Corvette looks incredible at the moment. But Andy Lloyd, one of the big DPI drivers coming in is Harry Tinkle.
Well, I mean, Harry's been around for a long time. I remember when Harry got his first break with Jota in, I'm trying to think the year, it must have been 2014. And he was sort of taken under the wing by Simon Dolan at Jota and was immediately fast. I believe Harry is managed by, I'm trying to think who it is, the name will come to me, but he really dug in and he really learnt and he worked extremely hard, and he's now one of the best sports car drivers in the world. He's had a lot of experience now, both in Europe and in the States. And he's the driver of the highest quality, so he will do very well this year.
Yeah, so there's plenty of obviously British drivers to look out for. And, it's, as I said, the list is huge. And these are only the British drivers. We've got, as I said, the list is just immense. And you've got people like Albuquerque, Felipe Nasr, Sebastian Bourdais. They're all taking part this year as well. I mean, Andy Lloyd, what is there any other names on that list that really sort of stands out for you that makes you think, wow, okay, this is going to be a good year?
Well, as you say, you look down that list and all the names on it are phenomenal. So I think I was just having a look at the. There was two drivers that stuck out to me. I think Will Stevens is on the entry list as well, and Will is another one of those drivers who's driven everything everywhere, and I always look forward to seeing him racing. Very competitive, raced in the European Le Mans series. But I think there are two drivers that I'm going to be particularly keeping an eye out for. One is both in the P2 category. One is James Allen in the 69 G-Drive Racing Hours. He's racing alongside John Faub, Luca Giotto, and Tima Ashi. And he's a young Australian driver. I first met him in 2017 in his first year in LMP2 when he raced with Graf. He finished third in the ELMS, took 2 wins. Subsequently went on to drive for Dragon Speed, G-Drive Racing. He's got experience at Daytona. He took a convincing class pole in the 2019 Rolex 24. He's continued to do very well in the European Le Mans Series, finished 6th in the LMP2 class last year. And although he's a very, very quiet, considered young man, but lightning fast and very determined. So I should be keeping close tabs on him. The other young driver that I think is going to be with us for the next 20 years of sports car racing plus is Phil Hanson in the United Autosports Oreca alongside James Maguire, Will Owen and Guy Smith. I think they're entered for Daytona, Sebring, McGlen and Petit Le Mans. But, won the Asian Le Mans Series in 2017 and 19, won the European Le Mans Series in 2020, came second in 21. Even though he's very young, he's very experienced and he's fast. So I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on the United car, that's for sure.
Yes, and Andy Hopley, if you remember, I gave you a bit of homework before the show, didn't I? To look at the GTD category. So who stands out for you in that one?
Well, it's a good question, Josh. If I remember rightly, Daryn Turner is going to be one because he's an Aston Martin stalwart, but then also team also in an Aston Martin. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they obviously racing for different teams. But, you know, obviously being Aston Martin being British, then I'm obviously going to follow Aston Martin for GTD honours.
Yeah, and I mean, I reckon you've looked through the team, the drivers and stuff for the GTD, especially. What would you say? Who would you put your money on? Which manufacturer would you put your money on to win IMSA this year? Like, would you say Lexus, Porsche, Mercedes? What one?
It's a hard one, but I'd say notably Porsche would be up there, but then give Lexus a due because that is technically essentially a bit of most homegrown talent in America drive for Lexus in that division. But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how Mercedes get on as well, but Porsche is the name that stands out for me, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and of course it wouldn't be homework without the master being given some as well, and obviously I gave myself the difficult category, DPI. And the reason I say difficult is because the list of names in that category is jaw-dropping. I mean, the talent that is driving for these cars, for the outright wins, not in just Daytona, but in the whole season, is incredible. I mean, you've got Oliver Jarvis, Harry Tinkle, you've got Felipe Albuquerque, AJ Almenda. And then you go down the list even further. You've got the likes of Felipe Albuquerque, Sebastian Bourdais taking part as well, Dane Cameron taking part, Helio Castro Neves taking part, you know, and Mike Conway, of course, in the Cadillac. So you've got some big manufacturers. You've obviously got the Cadillac, you've got Acura, you've got Mazda. They're all taking part, and it's a category which I think, just looking on paper, you can overlook it because you think, it'll be, you know, one team will go further ahead. But in seasons past, it's been so competitive and it's so fast as well, and it's been a great category for IMSA, and it's worked really well. I would say worked probably a little bit better than the Le Mans hybrids that have taken part in the WEC, where obviously Toyota have just dominated that, and it just became a really non-entity, really, just battling between the Toyotas. But this year looks like it could be one of those years which is just like a way to bow out of the category. You know, the category is changing next year, so they've got the big names in to take part for the final year. And it will just be a truly incredible season. You just know it's going to go down right down to the wire. If I was to pick a manufacturer to win, my bet would be on Mazda, purely because Mazda have shown the reliability, not necessarily the performance, but the reliability. And, you know, in races where it can go, they're 4 or 5 hour long, 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, it's not the speed that counts. You can be fast for 2 hours, but you break down. So the reliability aspect of it, that's the important bit. But for those of you listening, obviously, please join the debate on social media, you know, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. You know, I don't think we're on Tinder yet, but we're probably going to get Andy Hopley to go on that for us. But yeah, please join the debate. You know, have you seen IMSA? If you have, like, what's your favourite track? What's your favourite round? Are you going to IMSA this year? Are you in America listening to this right now and thinking, yes, you know, I'm sitting there camped in Daytona waiting for that one race? Is there a driver you're looking out for? Please let us know. This is, of course, Motorsport Radio. And now I'm going to ask Andy Lloyd to do the impossible task of describing what DPI means, what GTD means, and all of that. What are they?
They're different classes within a multi-class race. So if we look at the three prototype categories, which is Daytona Prototype International, DPI, LMP2 and LMP3. This is the last year for DPI before they move on to the more Daytona hybrids, LMDH. Basically, the Daytona Prototype DPIs they're based on an LMP2 chassis using the manufacturer's engines and some bodywork. When this series was started, the intention was to reduce the costs of developing prototypes. So by saying to manufacturers, choose a chassis, choose your engine, and the chassis could be selected from a very small number of suppliers. And then with the bodywork, put some tweaks on it so it gives it some kind of brand identification. So, for instance, the Cadillac DPI is based on a Dallara P217 chassis, but it uses the Cadillac 5.5 litre V8 with some styling cues in the bodywork. But probably the best way to look at this is in terms of the lap times. For instance, the fastest race lap at Daytona last year in the DPI category was a 1:34.7, give or take. Now, the LMP2, hopefully we're more familiar with LMP2. It's raced all over the world. It's probably one of the most popular and most competitive prototype classes globally. The regulations for this were defined some years ago now, 2015, 2016. So it's basically a spec chassis. Most of the top teams use the Orica 07 chassis. So it's a spec chassis and a spec engine, which is the Gibson engine. Produces about 540 brake horsepower. The speeds were reduced. This is for WEC, and I'm pretty sure it would probably count for IMSA as well, because they wanted to get the speeds of the P2 cars down to below those of hypercar in WEC. But as an example, the fastest race lap at Daytona last year was a 1:37.1. So you've got a 1:34.7 for the DPIs and a 1:37.1 for the LMP2s. Now, the next level down in prototype racing is LMP3. LMP3 was always intended to be effectively an entry-level prototype class. Again, it's a spec chassis. All the cars use a 5.6 litre Nissan engine, produces about 455 brake horsepower. And last year, fastest race lap at Daytona was a 1:43.4. So you can see the progression from a 1:34.7 for DPI, 1:37.1 for P2, and a 1:43.4 for LMP3. The irony is that actually sometimes the LMP3 cars sound better than the bigger classes, but it's just the way the engines are designed. Now, of course, this year in the GT classes, we've moved away from GTLM and GTD to effectively two GTD classes. Now, the reason for this was, as we all know, over the last 3 years, interest in GTE and GT Le Mans has waned, certainly at IMSA, to the point where I think they had just 3 full-time entries for the start of the 21 season, which was the 2 Corvette C8Rs and the WeatherTech Porsche. So the decision was taken that for moving forward, and bearing in mind that GT3 is regarded as kind of a global benchmark for top-level GT racing outside of ACO and FIA sanctioned GTE, it was decided that if you're going to race a GT car in IMSA, it's going to be in GT3 spec. So everybody racing a GT car at Daytona is going to be racing a GT3 car. But what IMSA have done cleverly is they've said that although effectively the cars are, and the whole point of GT3 racing, if you take it back years, was that you could, because of the balance of performance process, you could take lighter, lower power cars and heavier, higher power cars and balance their performance so they could they could race on equal footings. So you avoided this kind of arms race of people rushing out to buy the most expensive GT car for next season because that's the only car that was going to win. And it's been incredibly successful. You know, GT3 cars are raced around the world. But what IMSA have done very cleverly is they've said, we're going to have two classes within GTD. We're going to have GTD Pro, which is effectively for factories and factory drivers. And then we're going to have GTD, which is what it was always intended to be, pro-am drivers or two amateur drivers. Now, the GTD class can compete if they wish with the GTD Pros, but they are two effectively separate competitions. And what IMSA have said is that whilst they will be carrying out the balance of performance process, they will be balancing the performance separately for the GTD Pros and the GTDs, which I think is very clever, because a factory team with factory drivers are going to be much better and quicker at getting a car up to its optimum speed. Whereas a car that may have an amateur driver, of course, they're not going to have the same level of expertise to develop the car that quickly at a race weekend. So the GTD Pros and the GTDs will have a separate balance of performance. And it's expected that the GTD Pro car class will be racing slightly quicker than the GTDs. So I think it's going to be a very interesting well, it's not an experiment. It's what IMSA are going to do in 2022. But whereas we've become used to seeing GT3 and GT4 cars, and we understand that, it's going to be interesting to see the difference between GTD Pro and GTD cars, especially when you're going to have some pro drivers in the GTD Pro-Am cars. But the grid is absolutely huge for the GTD field, and that is going to be one of the most competitive classes.
Yeah, and this is why we've got a different championship almost for the GT4 and TCR class, which is called the Michelin Pilot Series, which again was very successful last year. You know, we had big battles between the Porsches, the Beamers, the Camaros, the Mustangs. They were all having a big old ding dong. It was really good. They're often 2-hour races, and as you said, it'll be interesting to see how the GTD Pro-Am and a GTD compete, whether they can compete at the same pace or whether the GTD Pro drivers just drive away as if, you know, it's like a different category. It'll be interesting to see, but it does bring in the variety. So, Andy Hopley, a final word on the IMSA. Why should people think, okay, it's 2022, I'm going to try something new. Why should they watch this championship?
It's a good question, Josh. But my opinion is, why should you watch it? Well, the grids are huge for starters, and the action at some of the circuits, like we've discussed, like Long Beach, Lime Rock, Sebring, Daytona, it's going to be a big spectacle, and it is going to be proving the faster, obviously, you know, the more faster cars against the, let's say, lower end of the spectrum at, you know, GTD. But it's going to be, it's a big, massive spectacle, and it is a bigger sort of series than, I'm going to say, WEC and maybe any other GT in the world. I might get myself a bad reputation for saying this now, but that's personally what I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I think. I think IMSA is actually doing a better job than FIA WEC. I think they could do a lot to follow what IMSA are doing. I mean, Andy Lloyd, obviously it is a bit of a battle between the two big brands, the FIA WEC and IMSA. But would you say the IMSA are doing a better job for fans to watch? Or would you say maybe they're doing the same sort of thing, or what?
I think, excuse me, I think our cousin stateside has probably always been better at promoting sport and understanding what the enthusiast wants, especially in the television market. It's interesting that for IMSA Radio, they have probably got, there are many excellent sports car broadcasters, but John Hindhaugh has got to be one of the very best. And personally, the way that I like to watch this race, because there's so much going on, and whilst I enjoy the spectacle of looking at cars going around a circuit, I find there's more interest in looking at the timing screens in conjunction with a good commentary. And John Hindhaugh and Jeremy Shaw, in conjunction with a timing screen, is pretty much all I need to get a lot of enjoyment out of watching or following the IMSA WeatherTech Sportscar Championship. But I think to answer your question, I think what IMSA are probably more sensitive to, as we alluded to at the start of the show, is this balance between manufacturers, sponsors, promoters, enthusiasts, drivers, both professional and amateur, and making sure that everybody gets maximum bang for the buck out of the series. And I that's one of the reasons why I enjoy watching it. I think there is a bit of a feeling that IMSA is more inclusive, if that's the right way to describe it. It sort of warmly invites fans to join the watching community. I don't necessarily get that all the time from WEC, but maybe that's just me. But you will never watch a bad IMSA race.
Well, definitely, I agree. As I said, the Michelin Pilot Challenge, check it out, guys. I was watching the Atlanta race, and I couldn't turn away from it for a minute. It's touring cars and GT4 classes together. Huge variety of touring cars. I mean, Hyundai are really well represented. They had 2 different cars this year, 2021. But the idea of having a GT4 and touring car only championship works really well, because the GT4 cars, obviously, they're basically road cars, and the touring cars are faster. I mean, there was a moment I was watching where the Mustang had an issue, fell back in touring cars, and he couldn't keep up with the TCR cars. We're talking about a 500 horsepower V8 Mustang GT4, unable to keep up with a 1.6 turbo Hyundai. But because they've got better handling, the GT4 cars are just road cars. It's that brilliant racing, and you get that throughout the field. So you get that in the WeatherTech and in the Michelin Pilot. I mean, download the app, guys. It's on Google Play and all that sort of stuff. Download the IMSA app, because it's got all of the clips and all of the news and everything. And of course, we'll be doing a preview ahead of Daytona anyway. But yeah, it's, for me, if I say a final word on why you should watch it, simply, it's the best endurance racing you'll ever see. And it proves to you that endurance isn't just 4 hours of boring racing. It's edge of the seat stuff. Thank you guys for watching. Of course, join the debate on social media. Is IMSA better than WEC? Maybe we should have a debate on that. Maybe we should have a big argument about it. Who knows? But let us know on Facebook, on Twitter. And they say that Andy Hopley is going to launch our Tinder app as well. So join us, join the debate on that. It's been great talking to you guys, of course, about this fantastic championship, and we hope to see you soon. So goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from the 2 Andys.
Thanks a lot, guys. Really nice talking about it, and I'm looking forward to our Rolex preview show.
Oh yes, so am I. I'm all ready for it.